The wind that swept through the San Rosa Valley carried more than dust that morning. It carried a silence heavy enough to press against a man's heart. The Apache warrior, known among his people as Tayen, guided his black horse through the low brush and up the narrow path that led to the cabin he had built with his own hands. The rising sun painted the land in shades of gold and sorrow, and each hoofbeat echoed like a memory he could not bury. Tayen had been gone for weeks, no months, perhaps. Time had lost its meaning since the battle by Dry River Canyon, where blood had soaked into the earth faster than the rain. He had returned to finish what was left of his life, the small cabin by the creek, the garden she had planted, and the woman he once called wife. Her name was Evelyn, a name too soft for the rugged land, yet too strong to be forgotten. As he reached the ridge, Tayen pulled the reins tight. Smoke no longer rose from the chimney. The garden lay strangled by weeds. Even the fence he had carved from pine logs leaned tiredly against the ground. Something inside him shifted, an unease that neither battle nor hunger had ever caused. He dismounted slowly, boots sinking into dry earth. The cabin door stood ajar, creaking back and forth in the wind like an old song without rhythm. He called softly, "Evelyn?" Only the wind answered. Inside, the cabin smelled of dust and cedar. A single chair lay overturned beside the hearth. Her shawl, woven with the same scarlet thread she had worn the day he met her, hung limply on a peg, faded by sun and time. He stepped closer, fingers brushing the cloth, and the world seemed to fold around him. Memories came in waves. Her laughter by the river, her gentle scolding when he carved too deep into the wood, her voice promising she'd wait for him, no matter how long. But she hadn't. A letter rested on the table, pinned beneath a stone to keep it from the wind. His name was scrawled across it in trembling ink. Tayen. He hesitated before touching it. The paper was creased, corners yellowed, as if it had been written long ago, perhaps the day she decided to leave. His chest tightened. He picked it up, but before opening it, his eyes wandered to the empty bed in the corner. The blanket hers was gone. That simple absence told him more than the letter could. She had taken her warmth with her. He unfolded the page carefully. The ink had bled in places, as if tears had mixed with the words. "My Tayen, if you are reading this, it means the mountain has given you back to this world. But I fear I cannot be here to greet you. I waited as long as my heart could bear. Every dawn without you was a year. Every whisper of wind became your name. But hunger came, and sickness too. The land grew cruel, and I am not the woman I once was. I had to leave, Tayen, before I died waiting. Forgive me if you can. I go where I might find work or peace or both. If the Great Spirit allows, I will return. Your wife, Evelyn." The words blurred as Tayen read them again and again. He sat down at the table, elbows on his knees, letter trembling in his rough hands. The world outside the window swayed with light, but inside, time froze. He thought of the night before he left their last argument, when she begged him not to go fight for a land that wanted neither of them. He had told her a man must defend what's his. She'd replied softly, "Then defend me, Tayen, not the land." Now the echo of that plea burned through his skull. The wind howled through the cracks of the cabin like a mourning voice. He rose, walked outside, and looked toward the horizon where the road cut through the valley. A single crow perched on the dead oak near the well, its feathers glinting black against the sun. He whispered into the emptiness, "I came back, Evelyn." No answer came, only the distant cry of the crow, fading with the wind. Tayen stood still for a long time, until the sun slipped higher and the desert began to shimmer with heat. The letter crumpled slightly in his hand, as if the weight of it was too much for paper to hold. Somewhere beyond those distant ridges, Evelyn was alive, or so he hoped. And hope, in a land as cruel as the West, could be a man's greatest mercy, or his final curse. The morning sun climbed higher, but its warmth couldn't thaw the chill that clung to Tayen's heart. The letter in his pocket felt heavier than stone. Each word from Evelyn's hand burned into his mind. I waited as long as my heart could bear. He stepped off the porch and crossed the yard where the grass had died in patches. Every detail whispered of her absence. The broken bucket beside the well. The empty chicken coop. The rocking chair that no longer moved in the wind. She had been gone a while, months, perhaps. Tayen crouched by the path leading to the creek, scanning the ground like a tracker reading old memories. He noticed faint print small boots, lighter than a man's, Evelyn's size. The marks led toward the creek and then vanished into the hardened earth beyond. The creek itself was a skeleton of what it once had been, water reduced to a thin silver thread winding through cracked clay. He knelt beside it, dipped his hand in, and watched the ripples distort his reflection. He hardly recognized himself anymore, the scars, the rough beard, the years stolen by war. He had left this valley to protect his people, but the cost had been his life with her. He rose and followed the old wagon trail west. His horse, Onyx, trailed behind, nostrils flaring at the scent of dust and time. The land stretched out endlessly, sagebrush and cacti, their shadows reaching like desperate fingers. Hours passed before he reached the remains of an old fire pit near a cluster of cottonwoods. Charred wood. A few stones arranged neatly. And there, half buried in sand, a piece of red fabric fluttered weakly in the wind. Tayen picked it up. It was from her shawl. The same scarlet thread she had worn the day she promised she'd wait. He pressed it to his lips. "Evelyn," he murmured. He could almost hear her voice again, calling him foolish for talking to ghosts. Near the ashes, he found something else, a small wooden carving. It was rough, unfinished, but he recognized his own handiwork. A small figure of a bird, half-shaped from pine. He had started carving it for her before he left for battle. She must have carried it with her. But why leave it here? Tayen looked around. There were other signs. A broken horseshoe, footprints from a heavy wagon, and drag marks from crates or barrels. The soil told a story. Evelyn hadn't left alone. She had been traveling with a group. Traders, maybe settlers heading toward the next town. He saddled Onyx again and followed the trail westward, through the flatlands where coyotes sang to the empty sky. Every now and then, he thought he saw her in the distance, a figure in a pale dress moving between the mirage waves of heat, but when he rode closer, she vanished like a breath in the wind. By sundown, Tayen reached the old crossing at Clearwater Bridge. The wood planks were half rotted, creaking under the horses' hooves. Across the bridge stood a tavern, a lonely building of worn oak and faded paint, its sign reading The Hollow Spur. A tired man swept the porch, pausing to squint at Tayen as he approached. "Evenin'," the man said cautiously. "You looking for someone, stranger?" Tayen dismounted. A woman. About 30. Brown hair, kind eyes. Might have passed through months ago. "Her name's Evelyn." The man scratched his beard, thinking. "Can't say I know the name, but there was a lady fit that description come through late spring. Traveled with a wagon train. Said she was heading north toward Silver Bend. Looked sickly, though. Coughed some. Wore a red shawl." Tayen's chest tightened. Was she alone? Mostly. There was a preacher with the wagon folk. He helped her some. Kind man. Tayen nodded slowly. "Thank you." He reached into his pouch and dropped 2 silver coins onto the porch. "For your words." The man looked down at the coins, then back up. "You her husband?" Tayen's eyes darkened like thunderclouds. "I was," he said softly, and turned away. He camped that night beyond the bridge, under a sky full of restless stars. The sound of the river murmured faintly in the dark. He held Evelyn's letter close to his chest. staring into the dying fire. Somewhere north, beyond mountains and cold winds, she was alive or struggling to be. And he would find her, even if the desert swallowed him first. He closed his eyes and whispered to the flames, "If she's gone again when I reach her, I won't survive it twice." The road to Silver Bend was a trail of dust and memory. Tayen rode through 3 days of blistering sun and freezing nights, guided by the faint hope that Evelyn still breathed somewhere beyond the next ridge. The land around him shifted from arid plains to canyons carved by time, their red walls glowing under the morning light. Each mile stretched his patience thin, yet his heart, though bruised, refused to stop beating for her. When the town finally came into view, it shimmered like a mirage. Silver Bend was no more than a collection of wooden buildings pressed against the foothills, a saloon, a general store, a blacksmith, and a church with a crooked cross. It was the kind of place where every face told a secret and every secret had a price. Tayen dismounted near the watering trough, brushing the dust from Onyx's mane. Heads turned as he walked through the main street. His skin marked him as Apache, his bearing as something more. Whispers followed him, curious, cautious, and not without fear. He entered the saloon first. The scent of whiskey, smoke, and stale sweat hung in the air. A piano sat silent in the corner, keys chipped like old teeth. Behind the counter, a woman with sharp eyes and gray-streaked hair polished a glass. "What'll it be, stranger?" she asked, eyeing the feathers on his necklace. "I'm looking for someone," Tayen replied quietly. "A woman named Evelyn. She traveled with a wagon train in the spring. Might have passed through here." The woman paused. "Can't say the name's familiar, but there was a group came through around that time. Rough shape they were in. One of the wagons carried a sick woman. Pale as moonlight, coughed blood, I heard." Tayen's throat tightened. "Did she survive?" The woman sighed. "They stayed one night. The preacher prayed over her in that corner booth. She had a red shawl, if I recall right." He turned sharply. "Where did they go after?" "North," she said. "To the hills near Larkspur Ridge. Heard they aimed to settle near the mines. But word was not all of 'em made it." Tayen left 2 coins on the counter and stepped out before she could say more. The air outside tasted of smoke and regret. He headed toward the church. Its wooden door groaned as he pushed it open. Inside, the light filtered through cracked windows, painting the pews in dusty gold. A man in a worn black coat stood by the altar, his head bowed. "Preacher," Tayen said softly. The man turned middle-aged, kind eyes, face tired from long miles. "Son, you don't look like the praying type. I'm looking for a woman, Evelyn. You may have traveled with her." Recognition flickered in the preacher's gaze. "Ah, yes. The lady with the red shawl. Strong spirit, though her body was failing." He stepped closer, voice lowering. "She rode with us as far as the ridge. Fever near took her. I did what I could, but—" He hesitated. "She asked me to give you something if you ever came." From his coat, the preacher pulled a small locket. Tayen's breath caught as he opened it, a tiny sketch of Evelyn inside, drawn in charcoal, her eyes alive with light. "She spoke of you," the preacher said gently. "Said she was sorry for the way things ended. Said if the Lord allowed, she'd wait for you somewhere you both once called peace." Tayen frowned. "Somewhere we called peace?" "She didn't explain," the preacher admitted. "After she left our company, she was carried by a trapper toward the hills. Said there was a cabin by a lake. I pray she reached it." Tayen closed the locket, his jaw tight. "Thank you, Reverend." As he stepped outside, the clouds above the mountains gathered thick and gray. A storm was coming. He mounted Onyx and rode north again, his heart pounding with a strange mix of fear and hope. He remembered a lake they'd once visited before the War Willow Lake. a quiet place surrounded by birch trees and wildflowers. Evelyn had loved it there. If she was alive, that's where she'd be. Lightning cracked across the horizon as he urged Onyx onward. The rain began to fall, cold and sharp as truth. He didn't care. He'd ride through thunder and ghosts if that's what it took. Because now, for the first time, Tayen had something more than a letter. He had a direction and a promise. The storm broke over the plains like an angry drum. Rain fell in sheets, pelting the earth until the dust became rivers of mud. Tayen rode through it all, his hair plastered against his face, his body slick with rain. The locket hung from his neck now, pressed against his chest like a heartbeat that wasn't his. Each thunderclap seemed to whisper her name, Evelyn, Evelyn. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean but heavy with silence. The hills opened up to a valley where Willow Lake shimmered like a silver coin under the rising sun. The place hadn't changed much since he last saw it, tall birch trees bowing over the water, soft grass bending in the breeze, and the faint cry of loons echoing across the calm surface. But there, on the far side of the lake, stood something new, a small cabin of rough-hewn logs and a thin trail of smoke curling from its chimney. Tayen's pulse quickened. He nudged Onyx forward, guiding the horse carefully down the slope. Every step felt like walking into a dream he didn't trust. The closer he came, the more details revealed themselves, a small garden fenced with willow branches, a bucket left by the well, and a line of clothes fluttering weakly in the wind. When he reached the porch, he dismounted quietly and called out, "Evelyn?" No answer, only the soft lap of waves against the shore. He pushed open the door. Inside, the cabin smelled of herbs and ash. A pot of stew still simmered over the small fire. On the table lay a half-sewn blanket, a comb, and a cup still warm. She had been here recently. His breath hitched as his gaze moved to the bed. A shawl lay folded at its edge. The red one. He stepped closer, trembling slightly, and touched the fabric. It was damp, not with rain, but with sweat. She was alive. Somewhere nearby. Suddenly, a faint sound came from outside, the crunch of footsteps. Tayen turned sharply and reached instinctively for the knife at his waist. A man appeared at the doorway, tall, rough-bearded, dressed in a trapper's coat and carrying a rifle slung over one shoulder. His eyes widened when he saw Tayen. "You're trespassing, friend," the man said cautiously. "I'm looking for my wife." Tayen replied evenly. "Her name is Evelyn. She was here." The man hesitated, lowering his weapon slightly. "Then you must be Tayen." Tayen's stomach clenched. "You know my name." "She spoke of you," the trapper said, stepping inside. "Said if a warrior with long black hair ever came, to tell him she's safe. I helped her through the winter. Fever near killed her, but she pulled through. Where is she now?" Tayen demanded. The trapper looked toward the lake. "She left 2 days ago. Said she had to find something before you did. Something she'd hidden. Didn't say what, only that it mattered more than her life." Tayen frowned. "Which way did she go?" The trapper pointed north, toward the mountains. "Up through the old mine trails. Dangerous place. Bandits roam there now." For a long moment, Tayen said nothing. Then he took the locket from around his neck and held it up. "She gave this to you?" "No," the man said. "She carried a second one. Said it was for him if he ever found her. I reckon she meant you." Tayen studied him carefully, then nodded. "Thank you for keeping her alive." The trapper shrugged. "Didn't do much. She's stronger than she looks. Told me she'd seen too much death to fear it anymore." Tayen's jaw tightened. She shouldn't have had to face it alone. He stepped back outside, rain dripping from the cabin's eaves. The air was cool and sharp with pine. The mountains loomed in the distance, jagged and gray, their peaks veiled in fog. Somewhere up there, Evelyn was walking, weak-sick but still moving. He saddled Onyx once more. Before riding off, he turned back to the trapper. "If she returns, tell her Tayen was here, and he's not leaving again." The trapper nodded solemnly. "She'll want to hear that." As Tayen rode toward the north trail, the sun broke through the clouds, spilling gold across the wet earth. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint scent of wildflowers her scent. He looked to the mountains and whispered, "Hold on, Evelyn. I'm coming." And for the first time in years, a flicker of something close to hope stirred in his heart. The air grew thinner as Tayen climbed into the northern mountains. The trail wound through pines and granite cliffs, every step echoing against the stone like a heartbeat that refused to die. Snow still clung to the shaded ravines, and the scent of cold earth filled his lungs. He had left Willow Lake before sunrise, his mind fixed on only one thing, Evelyn. The trapper's words haunted him. "She went to find something she'd hidden before you did." Those words gnawed at him like hunger. What could she have hidden that mattered more than her life? By midday, he found signs she had passed through. Along the narrow trail, he spotted a torn piece of linen snagged on a bramble. The stitching was familiar, her sewing. A little farther, near a fallen log, lay the imprint of small boots in the mud, already filling with rainwater. He crouched and pressed his hand into the print. Still soft. She couldn't be more than a day ahead. The mountains loomed higher, their shadows swallowing the sun. Tayen guided Onyx carefully through the twisting path, past jagged rocks and icy streams. The sound of distant thunder rolled through the valley, though no storm showed itself. It was the kind of sound that made the world feel alive and haunted. As he climbed, he came upon the remains of an old mining camp. Rusted tools lay half buried in the soil, and the frames of wagons leaned broken against the hillside. A wooden sign, barely standing, read Hollow Creek Mine. The air smelled faintly of smoke. Someone had made camp here recently. Tayen dismounted and crouched near the blackened ashes of a fire. Among the coals, something glinted, a metal tin, scorched but intact. Inside were dried herbs, bits of bread, and a folded scrap of paper. He opened it with trembling hands. "Tayen, if you find this, I'm sorry I left again. There's something buried in the mine. Something I promised to keep hidden until the right hands found it. It's the last piece of who we were, and I can't let it be lost. If I don't return, know that I never stopped loving you." Evelyn, the paper slipped from his grasp as the wind howled through the trees. His heart ached, but beneath the pain grew a terrible fear. The mines were dangerous, abandoned for years after a collapse had trapped men inside. If she had gone in there alone— He rushed forward, leading Onyx to a narrow gorge where the mouth of the mine yawned open like a wound in the mountain. Old timbers framed the entrance, slick with moss. A faint light flickered inside. "Evelyn!" he shouted, his voice echoing deep into the dark. No reply. He lit a torch and stepped inside. The air was cold and heavy with the scent of rust and dust. Water dripped from the ceiling, and the ground was slick beneath his boots. Each step stirred memories of another life, their laughter, her voice reading by firelight, the warmth of her touch. Then, in the silence, he heard it, a soft cry. Weak, human. He moved toward the sound, torchlight throwing wild shadows against the walls. There, halfway down the tunnel, he found her shawl-soaked, torn, and pressed against a pile of rocks near a narrow crevice. "Evelyn!" A faint voice answered. "Tayen?" He dropped to his knees, pressing his hand against the gap. "Evelyn, I'm here." "Tayen, it's trapped," she whispered weakly. "The chest, it's behind the fall. I tried to reach it." "Forget the chest," he said fiercely. "I came for you." Her hand reached through the opening, thin, trembling, covered in dust. He clasped it tightly, tears mixing with dirt on his face. "I didn't think you'd come," she breathed. "I told you once," he said, voice cracking. "No desert, no death. No God's storm could keep me from you." He braced himself and began moving the rocks. Piece by piece, muscles straining, breath sharp in his lungs. The tunnel creaked above them, threatening collapse. But he didn't stop. Not now. Finally, he cleared enough space to see her face pale, smeared with soot, eyes wet with relief. "Tayen," she whispered. "It's not gold. What's buried here? It's us." Before he could ask what she meant, the ground shuddered with a low, rumbling groan. Dust rained from the ceiling. He pulled her free just as the tunnel behind them gave way in a thunder of stone. The light from his torch flickered out. Darkness swallowed them both. But somewhere in that blackness, her heartbeat thudded weakly against his chest, and that was enough to keep him breathing. The night wind howled through the canyon, carrying with it the distant cry of a coyote and the faint rhythm of hooves somewhere beyond the ridges. Tayen sat motionless beside the dying fire, its embers glowing like small red eyes staring into his soul. He hadn't slept in days. His wife's trail her scent, her footprints, her songs had all faded like smoke in the morning sun. But that night, something changed as the moon rose behind a thin veil of cloud. Tayen heard something he hadn't heard in years, a soft, trembling melody. It drifted across the canyon walls, echoing in the darkness. It was a woman's voice. It was her voice. He rose, his breath sharp in the cool night air. The sound seemed to come from deep within the canyon's hollow, where the shadows grew thickest. Tayen mounted his horse, his heart hammering like war drums. Every instinct told him to follow Dot as he rode through the narrow pass. The moonlight fell upon a series of carvings etched into the rock. They were old Apache symbol signs of mourning, of love, of return. He touched one with trembling fingers. It was her mark. "She's alive," he whispered to the night, but the canyon was not silent. A gunshot rang out. Then another. Dust exploded near his horse's hooves. Tayen ducked low, pressing his chest against the animal's neck, urging it forward. 3 riders burst from the shadows, men from the mining camp, their torches flickering, rifles glinting. "There he is." One of them shouted. "The savage is back." The word struck Tayen like a knife. He turned his horse sharply, darting through a maze of stone and brush, but the men were closing in. Bullets ricocheted off the rocks around him. He dismounted, slapped his horse's flank, and disappeared into the darkness on foot. The hunters shouted behind him, their boots scraping over loose gravel. Tayen crept through the canyon until he reached a small cliffside opening, a narrow cave. Half hidden by vines and stone dot inside, the air was cool and still. The faint song echoed again, softer this time, like a memory whispering from the past. He stepped deeper inside. The glow of the moon reflected faintly off the walls, illuminating something lying in the dust. A leather satchel. Inside it was a folded piece of parchment, wrapped in cloth. Tayen unwrapped it slowly, afraid it might vanish if he breathed too hard. It was a letter. "My heart," it began. "If you find this, then know that I tried to return. But they took me before the dawn. The men from the mining camp wanted land, not love. I could not let them find you. Forgive me." Tayen's knees weakened. The letter trembled in his hands. He pressed it to his chest, his breath ragged. His wife had not abandoned him. She had been taken. The echoes of boots drew closer. He tucked the letter into his belt, crouched low, and reached for the knife at his side. He wasn't ready to die. Not yet. When the first miner entered the cave, torch held high. Tayen struck like lightning, swift and silent. The torch hit the ground, sputtering out as the cave filled with chaos and echoing shouts. 2 more men rushed in, but Tayen was a shadow among stone. His blade flashed once, then again. When the echoes finally faded, the cave was still. Tayen stood over them, breathing heavily, the firelight from the dying torch reflecting in his eyes. He turned toward the entrance, the night wind touching his hair like a ghostly hand. He mounted his horse once more and looked toward the horizon. In the distance, he saw smoke thin and white rising from the direction of the northern woods. "She's there," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I'll find you, my wife." The canyon behind him was filled with silence again, save for the gentle hum of the night wind carrying the faintest trace of her song. Tayen rode out into the moonlight, his figure merging with the desert, a lone warrior chasing the echo of love through the wilderness. And far ahead, beyond the hills, a woman wrapped in a torn red shawl sat by another fire, staring toward the horizon, her eyes full of tears and hope, waiting for the man she once thought lost forever. The desert was vast, the journey uncertain, but something in the wind promised that fate was not yet done with them. The first rays of dawn stretched over the northern mountains like fragile threads of gold. Tayen rode through the mist, every muscle in his body aching, every sense alert. The desert behind him was quiet now, but the mountains ahead whispered secrets only the wind could carry. Somewhere in those valleys, Evelyn waited, or at least, he hoped she did. The smoke rising ahead was thin, almost ghostly, curling above the tree line of pines. Tayen slowed Onyx, scanning the clearing. There it was, a small camp, nearly hidden behind a ridge of rock and fallen timber. The fire crackled weakly, sending plumes of white into the cold morning air. And beside it sat a figure wrapped in a tattered red shawl. His heart stopped. "Evelyn," he whispered, voice trembling, hoarse from days of riding and shouting. The figure stirred. A thin hand lifted, brushing hair from her face. The sun caught her eyes. They were the same fierce, soft eyes that had haunted his dreams, alive with tears and hope. "Tayen?" She breathed, her voice barely audible over the wind. He dismounted, dropping to his knees beside her. His hands trembled as he touched her face, tracing the lines of her cheek, the curve of her jaw, memorizing every detail as though the desert itself might erase her memory at any moment. "I told you I'd find you," he said, voice breaking. "No storm, no canyon, no darkness could keep me from you." She tried to rise, but weakness overtook her. He caught her in his arms, supporting her trembling body. "You've been through so much," he murmured, "and yet here you are, alive." Evelyn leaned against him, letting herself be held for the first time in months. "I hid something," she whispered. "Something from the miners, from the world. It's why I risked the canyon, why I stayed ahead of them. I couldn't let them take it." Tayen looked at her, understanding dawning. "What is it?" She hesitated, then pulled from her satchel a small carved wooden chest. Its surface was worn, etched with symbols they both recognized, Apache markings, intertwined with the initials of their own hearts. "It's us," she said softly. "Our memories, our promises, everything we swore to protect. I buried it in the mine, hoping one day you'd come." Tayen held the chest carefully, cradling it as if it were as fragile as Evelyn herself. "I will protect it. I will protect you." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine, rain-soaked earth, and the faint traces of fire from the camp. Around them, the mountains seemed to breathe, echoing their reunion. The sun rose higher, burning away the last remnants of mist. Evelyn leaned her head against his chest. "I never stopped hoping," she admitted. "Even when I thought you were lost, I felt you coming back to me." Tayen closed his eyes, letting the moment sink deep into his bones. "And I never stopped chasing you," he said. "Even when the desert tried to swallow me, even when the mines tried to hide you, I kept riding." For a long moment, the world held its breath. The mountains, the valley, the lake behind them. Even the wind itself seemed to wait as if acknowledging that some things were worth every hardship. Finally, Tayen lifted his gaze, looking out over the peaks and valleys that had tested him so severely. "We're going home," he said. "Together." Evelyn nodded, a smile breaking across her face despite the exhaustion. "Home." "With you." They spent that day walking down the mountain trail, Onyx following silently beside them. Every step they took felt lighter than the last, as though the weight of months, maybe years, had finally lifted. Tayen carried the chest, symbol of everything they had endured and survived. Evelyn leaned on his arm, her strength returning slowly with every mile dot as they reached the clearing where the valley opened to Willow Lake. The sun glinted off the water. The cabin was still standing, weathered but waiting. Tayen set the chest down beside the door, then took Evelyn's hands in his. "We fought too long to let this end any other way," he said. She looked at him, eyes shining with tears and laughter. "Then it won't. We have each other. That's all that matters." The wind shifted, brushing across the lake and the cabin, carrying with it a whisper of promise. Tayen kissed her hand, then her forehead, and together they stepped inside. The fire in the hearth had long gone cold, but now, as they rekindled it, the warmth returned not just to the cabin, but to their hearts. Outside, the mountain stood silent witness, the lake mirrored the dawn, and the desert beyond held no claim over them. Tayen and Evelyn were home, finally.